Just said, for goodness sake, kiddo, life is just too short. Just grab it, jump it, do it. I knew I wanted to have my own company. I knew at some stage I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I really felt that I was a little bit caged and I needed to get out.
So tell me a little bit about your journey into adulthood.
To answer that, I'm not sure if I'm made adulthood yet.
Hello grown-ups, and welcome to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up with me, your host, Sam Cooper-Gray. This week we interview Beverley Brown. She is a multiple business founder and investor and a key leader within women in banking and finance. She tells us that she doesn't feel like a grown-up, which is very common in our interviewees, and also the importance of asking for what you're worth. And one of her nuggets is why her colourful underwear is an important part of her armour. So please join me in welcoming Bev to the podcast. Welcome, Bev. So I'm going to kick off with the first question. So tell me a little bit about your journey into adulthood.
To answer that, I'm not sure if I'm made adulthood yet, if I'm really honest.
It will not surprise you that that's the answer most people give when I ask that question. So you're with a good crowd.
Oh, brilliant, because I would say that I'm still that Tigger that's bouncing around. So I think for me, I grew up in an army household. So my formative years were spent abroad. So I was born in Shropshire, but grew up for my first sort of 5 years in Hong Kong. My father was attached to the Gurkhas, so we were really lucky to have such an incredible sort of start to life, really, in a different culture. And then we came back. My parents were then in Germany for many, many, many years, and I went to boarding school in Shropshire with my sister Amanda, and we sort of had a lot more time, I suppose, growing up with my grandparents than I did with my parents because they were abroad so much. But I think for that, it did formulate that lovely sort of generation gap where you get to learn and understand so much about your grandparents and their history that then also accumulates into what have your parents done to them, what do you do? So I think it's a real brilliant way to shape a life that you've had that 3 generations. So I think when I then went on to have my own children, I was able to share a lot of stories, because they didn't know their grandparents for that long. So to share those stories that they had that were very meaningful back then.
So boarding school in Shropshire.
Yeah, co-ed back in the day, actually, to be fair. So I think at the time my parents wanted me to go to my mother wanted me to go to an all-girls school, but they wear all these boater hats, and my father was like, no, that's not the way to start a journey for a woman that she's going to be. My kids are going to be phenomenal and they need to be with boys as well. So we ended up going to a co-ed school in Shropshire in a place called Oswestry, and met many, many wonderful people of whom I'm still in contact with. So again, very lucky to, I think when you're in a boarding environment, it really does shape you. You grow up very quickly. You are very much in a schedule and it's set, your days are set. And for those of you who know me, and obviously Sam, you know me very well, I'm not always a conformer. So I think for me, I was known as the sort of the naughtiest girl in the school. But at the same time, I think being the person that loves people, I always got away with it. So even though I was a bit of a tinker, at the same time, I think I was allowed to be. So I think the school did very much allow us to express ourselves, and some of the stories I could probably tell you. I tell my kids now, and I think that they do find it quite hilarious. So, yeah, I think my journey into adulthood is still there, but at the same time, I've got lots of story to share with my family.
And so you were at boarding school, and then you went straight into work at 17, 18?
Yeah, so I sort of bucked the trend in my family. I think most families these days, some people are the first in their generation to go to university. And I went through sort of GCSEs and into the first year of A levels. And I don't know whether it was in a boarding school environment, but I knew I needed to go. I knew I wanted to have my own company. I knew at some stage I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I really felt that I was a little bit caged and I needed to get out. So I sat down with my parents and said, I don't want to do A levels, and with this sort of, and then there was an emergency meeting with the headmaster at school. My parents came over from Germany. It was like, my God, what's going on? And I just knew I needed to go. I didn't know that it was paved with gold from Shropshire to London, but I just felt in my world that I was ready. I didn't want to go the academic route. My sister obviously did, and she became a lawyer, but I just chose to come to London. And the funniest thing, my parents were both like, okay, that's if that's what you want to do, but you have to have plan B. So what are you going to do? You can't just put your rucksack on and come to London. You need to think about what you're going to do. So my mother turned around and said to me, right, learn to type. We're going to send you to Secretarial College in Hampstead, of which I got a scholarship to. And at least you've got a skill. If you come out, you can do something. You will never be unemployed if you can type. And at that time, I was very into fashion. So my passion was fashion and still is. And so I'd applied to the London College of Fashion and I got a place, but my mother said, right, park it. You have got to go and get this typing first. So I did. I went and got the typing. And actually, from that, I sort of parked the fashion thing because I got offered a job with a charity called Scope, and that at the time was cerebral palsy. And I think that was where my journey first started, where I think I grew up very quickly overnight. And I went from being this girl in a boarding school, very sort of cocooned, into living in London, earning a salary and paying rent at 17. I mean, just when you look back now, when I look at my kids in their 20s, they're still only just finishing, just graduating or just in their first jobs. I had a mortgage at 21.
Wow. So what was it that made you so clear that the academic route wasn't? You clearly very early, I want to run my own company. I want to go off and do it on my own. Like, where did that come from?
It definitely came from me wanting to be slightly more in charge of my own destiny, and actually in charge of my own time. I think I've been regimented at boarding school. You have to be there, you have to be, wherever it was, you had to be somewhere at certain times. I was like, you know what, I don't necessarily want to go to tea at 5:30, and I don't necessarily want to get up at 6, and I just felt actually if I could find something, if I could take my learnings and learn on the jobs that I ended up doing, that could culminate in me having enough of a skill set to be able to do something for myself, which would allow me that freedom of time. So I think that's where if I look back, that's really where it started.
Which I guess, given you grew up in an army environment and boarding school where there was lots of structure, probably
Yeah.
something that happens to a lot of kids who've lived through that. They either love it or they rebel against it. And you definitely sound like a rebel to me. So went and worked for the charity. Talk to me a little bit about kind of your journey then through your 20s and into kind of getting into business, running your own businesses. How did that pan out?
So I spent a year with Scope, as it's called now, but it was called the Spastic Society back then. And it was a company that or the charity had many, many sort of mansions all over the country. And these people with cerebral palsy were put in these places and were sort of put to pasture. And I worked very closely with a lady where we went. I haven't actually shared this a lot, but I spent 2 months in a wheelchair trying to understand how people with a disability were perceived, I suppose. And back then, I mean, we're talking late 80s, we're talking Brookside. When that was a thing, people just didn't have the respect. They only saw the disability. And that really taught me a huge lesson. And that, I think, has really molded how I treat people, how I connect with people, how I'm passionate about people, because everyone is a person underneath. It doesn't matter where you sit, who you are, whether you're the CEO or the postman. We all are just people. So I think for me, that was the start of my journey. But if I'm really honest, it didn't pay the rent back then. And
Fair.
I literally, honestly, it didn't pay the rent. And I got offered a PA role at Credit Suisse First Boston, or CSFB, or Credit Suisse as it's known now. And I remember turning up on the first day and thinking, God, I'm going to be a banker. And, that was that whole journey of, charity is my passion, but it doesn't pay the money. So I'm going to have to go and earn some money. So I went in as a PA to Credit Suisse. And that was when I got my first mentor. And he was an incredible guy. And he was in M&A. And his name was Gary Stevens. He was actually an Aussie. And I remember him saying to me, what are you doing being a PA? There's so much more you could do at Credit Suisse. You could be a trader. The world is your oyster. And so he turned around to me and said, with the graduates, we make them take the SFA program, the exams. And I don't know if they still have those now. And he said, but for you, what I'd say is take them. It's 6 weeks learning. If you pass them, Credit Suisse will reimburse you that money. So I sort of did it arse about face a little bit, I suppose, because actually I wasn't on the grad scheme. I was a PA and, I loved it. I loved my job. But I did. I studied for 6 weeks and it all went in, all went out. And I passed my SFA exams and Gary reimbursed me. And that was, again, I suppose, the next trajectory. I went on to the trading floor and did some work there. And then, I then actually got headhunted to go to ICAP or Intercapital, as it was called back then. And I went to work for a gentleman who became my second mentor and very close friend, Martin Quinton Archard. And he ran the emerging markets, the emerging markets desk. And he needed somebody who was a sort of jack of all, master of none, somebody to come in and really take the business through growth. And that was people, which is my passion, obviously. And that was through tech, hiring people in to get us up to date with tech. It involved me going and working in America for a year. And I just did so many different jobs out, both in London and stateswide. And I learned so much. And I remember him saying to me, and I think it was early 1994, you've got this, you've got people, you've got passion, you recruit, all these skill sets. He said, I've got a friend who, and it's actually his brother-in-law, worked for a company called Emerging Market Search and Selection. So that's how I tipped into recruitment. I went there, learnt my skill, created an operational search piece that was one of the first. There was only one other company, Trafalgar Partnership. So it created a search environment for back office, as it was called then. So it's ops, IT, finance. And I sort of turned that all on its head. Most people saw ops and IT and finance as a cost center. And for me, I turned it on its head and said, we need good people in this environment because actually it's a profit center. Because if the people in the back office don't deliver and don't settle, the trades don't look after them, the finance people don't do their job, then actually the front office guys are never going to make any money. And obviously back then, I say guys, literally, because it was guys. And, and I'd been the fourth girl into ICAP. I mean, obviously there are thousands of people globally now, TP ICAP. And so I wanted to firstly start a movement for women. So that became my sort of women uplifting women. That's where I started to create little groups of women where we went to the pub on a Friday, as opposed to the boys going to the pub on a Friday. So it's things like that that just intrinsically felt right for me. And that was where I sort of started my passion for looking to bring more women into banking at senior level. So when I created my own business, Nicoll Curtin, that was one of my main, that was really one of my values, was to really try and turn that dial on the female, I suppose the percentage of women we had in management level or at C-suite.
So you just very flippant went, when I started my new business. So tell me about what you'd said that very early on you had this desire to kind of maybe operate outside of the norm and kind of make your own rules. How did you get from working within a big search agency to starting that first business of your own?
So I was approached by a gentleman called Derek Johnson back in, it must have been March 1999. And he approached me through somebody else, actually, a third party initially, and this person said, I've got this gentleman. He's an entrepreneur. He doesn't have any businesses in finance, but he's really, really interested in recruitment and search recruitment. And he's been watching you for a couple of years and he would like to start a business with you. Now that just doesn't happen, right?
No.
it just doesn't happen. But very sadly, it was at the time when my daddy had been diagnosed with a terminal um, brain tumor. So the timing wasn't great. And for me, I'm 100% Sam, I'm all in. When I'm in, I'm all in. And I just turned around to Derek and I said, you know what? This is an opportunity of a lifetime, but my father, I just need to spend some time with him. And actually, I remember just before my dad died, he said to me, and we've been talking about it, and he was a bit frustrated with me actually. And just about a week before he passed away, he just said, for goodness sake, kiddo, life is just too short. Just grab it, jump it, do it. And actually, my daddy actually died in the May and then in the August. And I really respect Derek for this because he obviously knew what was going on and he didn't contact me to the August and he just rang me up and he said, is now the right time? And so that was how Nicoll Curtin was born. So it was sort of I remember meeting him. And actually I took Richard, my husband, went to Cafe Rouge on Putney Bridge Road and met with Derek and had the tears, talked about my dad, we talked about what he'd said to me, and I walked out of there as a very green entrepreneur who was starting their own business. So yeah, that was my sort of journey into my wonderful company, and I had the most incredible staff. I mean, I was so lucky, over 90 staff in 3 countries, Singapore, London, Zurich, and we smashed it. We absolutely smashed it. So yeah, I have been just in the right place, right time. But you make your own luck. But I think my dad was the one that just said, you go for it. And I did.
Just gave you that little bit of an extra push
Yeah.
to do it. So I don't mean to depress you, but 1999 was 26 years ago.
You don't know, it was, wasn't it?
I know. So you ran that company really successfully for years. Obviously, what's brought you to where you are now from running that really successful company?
So a couple of things. I grew some incredible people in that business that just thrived, and quite a few of them have got on to own their own companies. So I'm very proud of what they've achieved. I really am. I feel so lucky to have worked with some such fantastic people inside and out. But it got to about 2011, and I'd been out to Uganda to help build a school in Kachambala, and we'd raised a load of money through my daughter's school. And I came back from there, and my kids, George and Emily, were just hitting that time when I truly believed that they needed me a bit more. And I think the Uganda experience had really cemented that. And I came back and I sat with Derek and I just said, I'm ready now. I'm in my 40s. I really do need to sort of do something new, but I need to be at home a bit more. So we agreed that I would go. And I mean, he was a silent partner anyway. So I steered the business. And so we prepared for that, and I came home, and I was so lucky then and I think if you look at now to when this was, so this is 2011, and I said, right, I'm going to continue my work, but I'm going to work it around my kids. And actually, that's what I did. So I then moved on to creating Kenbury Associates. And I spent 2 years working for one of the banks, actually, one of the banks I'd worked with for a very long time, to increase their female population at senior level. And again, this is one of my third wonderful people that was in my life, another man called James Crabb. And James came to me one day and he phoned me up and he said, right, Mrs. B, you've got to be sick of that school run right now. We've got to get you back into work and doing something, but we'll work around you. And I said, okay, I will do these searches for you, but I have my children my priority. So, I can work from 7 till 3:30 and then after they go to bed, but in between, there's a few hours I need to have with them. And that's what I did. So yeah, I spent 2 years working for one bank, and we did bring in some incredible women who I'm still in touch with. So that's another thing. It's wonderful to make such great connections. And then since then, I've gone on with various people that I've met along this journey. I've worked with them. We've created some companies. We've invested. And now I've been in the, well, firstly, I'm now an investor in 3 female founded businesses, which I'm very, very proud of. I'm on the advisory body and invested. And I've also started with the beautiful Karen Rudich, Elementary B, which has now become Sherloc, which we created in 1999, which is a SaaS platform. So if I look back at all the things I've done, they're all bringing you to that moment where, from where you started to, it's a full circle of life, isn't it? It's that full circle of, you can then actually have this time to not only do the things that you're passionate about and work with the people that you truly believe in and your values are aligned with, but you also have some time for yourself. And you did touch on the 26 years, and I am actually in the planning my 60th at the end of next year. So, let's not forget that, I am sort of tipping that other end of my career. But for me, I'd say that this is probably the last 3 or 4 years, as we've gone through the pandemic and lockdown and all the challenges that have been brought. I think that has made me even more Tiggerish. I think that is allowing me to be more creative, to sew more golden threads with people, to connect more companies, to help and find partnerships, which I do through my Women in Banking and Finance, and obviously, of course, through all my charity work that I love and I'm so passionate about with the NSPCC and Childline. So yeah, I feel very, very lucky.
And what a journey you've been through as well. And some of those big moments where you've consciously stepped away from what you were doing that was successful. I think sometimes we forget how hard that is to do. So I'm going to get you to reflect back to that. We normally say 18. I'm going to say 17 when you started working for the charity, maybe. What would your younger self recognise about you, and what would she be absolutely blown away by?
Okay, so I was having a think about this. I had to write it down, so I might have to read a little bit of this if it's okay, because it's actually really made me think about my life. It's really made me think about my children. It's really made me think about a legacy, I suppose. And I was just putting here that it's kept me aligned to my beliefs and goals, that I pursued and achieved my dreams to be in charge of my own destiny. And I've ensured that I make time for others, that I've shared my learnings, that I've created something for myself as an entrepreneur. I've uplifted others, especially females. I've continued to carve out personal time to commit to my charities. I have ensured that my family has had as much of me as I can give. And that I hope that I've made, I suppose, a tiny weeny bit of the world a better place. And I hope I've made my kids proud. And I think the legacy that I'd like to pass on is one of making a meaningful difference wherever I can. So that was my reflection. And thank you for getting me to do that, because I think we also don't spend enough time really looking back at what we've done and what we've achieved, and what effect we might have had on others, and what effect others have had on us. And I think I have been so lucky to have been mentored by some truly amazing individuals who have given up their time to me, to help me learn, to be able to be creative, to be able to take that, what I call, very scary step into entrepreneurship. And I know now that, everyone is doing it. And really, it's wonderful to see the young, the next generations, really feeling that they have the power to do that. I love that. I love the learnings that I'm getting from the young. I love mentoring. I mentor some of my daughter's peer group, but I also mentor people actually older than me, if you can believe that, as well as my age bracket. So I think that sharing of knowledge that we all get to do, and it's certainly of things I've been to with you, where there's such a great, not just age demographic, but sector demographic. And for me, it is about sharing those different challenges, because we all have different challenges. And what we see on social media, what we are pulled into so much of the time now, is a snippet of time that actually doesn't have much meaning, and also smoke and mirrors. So for me, if I look back and I'm reflective of what I've stayed really close to my values of connectivity. And I think for me, that is one of the most important things in life, is keeping your connections. I think it is powerful. I think there is a lot of sadness and trouble in the life we're living in now, in the world we're in. And I think that reaching out and being able to connect is very, very strong, and it's a superpower that we all have if we wish to use it.
Absolutely. And I'm interested in all of those, like lots of decisions you've had to make during your life.
Yeah.
What was your best decision?
I thought you were going to ask me what was my worst, because I'd had that on paper.
I can ask you that as well, but let's start with best decision.
My best decision was definitely starting Nicoll Curtin. That was definitely something in my business life. That was definitely my best position, my best decision. I think if you ask me on a personal level, I have so many of those that I could share, because I just think I have been lucky. It's sliding door moments, isn't it? When you meet somebody just on a tube or on a train, or you start up a conversation, or you walk up to that person that looks sad and isn't talking to anybody, and you engage. And so there's so many best decisions I've made when you've sort of been knackered at the end of the day, but you've gone, do you know what, I've got to go to that event because I promised I'd go. And you go and you come back and you go, wow, that was incredible. So and I met so and so. So I think in my personal life, far too many, but in my personal life, taking that jump and knowing somebody really truly believed in my capabilities, and really truly, and I think Derek, at the time that sliding door moment that I lost my father, not only stepped in as a mentor for me and helped guide me as a 33-year-old with a business, where we sat in a tiny room. And actually, I'm going to be a bit crass about this, but that we sat in a tiny room. My friend Lara, she'd taken some time off to go and retrain as a lawyer, so she came in and temped as PA for me. And Andrea, we three of us sat in this tiny little rented office in Tower 42 on Old Broad Street. And you couldn't fart, because if you farted, we could all smell it. So there was 2 rules. 1, you don't fart, and 2, you have to wear the same perfume. That was the only 2 rules at the start of this business. So I think, if I'm reflective, that was probably my best decision, because it allowed me to really grow in every single way, to be a better mum, a better wife, a better friend, a better daughter, sister.
So as you offered it up, I'm now going to ask you, what's the worst decision you made?
Do you know what? And that's really short, because I don't believe in regret, because I think we make mistakes. We shouldn't regret them. We should learn from them. So I'm not a regretter. I'm not a shoulda, coulda, woulda either. It's, it is what it is. And we live our lives to the best that we can. So I have a absolutely gorgeous friend called Tarek, and I've known him for many, many, many years, and we are the naughty two. And he basically, when it started with Bitcoin and the blockchain stuff first came in, he gave me a tip, an investment tip, and I didn't take it. At the time, I was too busy. He was like, right, you've got to do it now. You've got to get on with it. And I remember thinking, yeah, must get to that. Busy diary. Didn't do it. And it's one of those sort of Julia Roberts, big mistake, huge mistake. But all I ever say now is not to dwell on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm with you. The only thing you can control is your reaction to a situation, right?
Yeah.
And if you just focus on the things that go wrong, your head doesn't have the space to focus on the things that have gone right, those sliding doors moments.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I think we're lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you said before, we make our own luck as well. You went and you took that leap, even though you were grieving your father, to start your first business, and you invest in other people, and you are one of the world's super connectors as well. So you give as much as you take, if not more. One of the things I like to ask everybody on the podcast is about the advice they've ignored. So this might be linked to that tip you didn't take, but When everyone gets given advice, what's the best piece of advice you've been given and you just chose not to go with it?
I think it was definitely that one. But I also was asked to go into another business. And at the time, I think um, my life was just too busy. I'd taken a step back to have that time with the kids and a really fabulous opportunity, which I can't actually comment, but it came up. And again, I just turned it down. And it was a game changer, really. But I think there is a story actually I can share, and I have told it before. So I'd set up Nicoll Curtin, and I'd been working for this bank that I ended up working for several years later when I sold out. And they'd asked me in to do a pitch, and it was a multiple pitch for some senior people into C-suite level. And I ended up competing with three male executives at other search firms. And the two guys that I ended up working for, I'd known for a long time, and we'll call Mr. A, Mr. Harley Davidson, because he drove a Harley Davidson, and Mr. B, but they're both bankers. Mr. B had graduated from Juilliard as a pianist. So two people completely, really good friends. Anyway, I ended up winning this pitch. And at the time, it was a six-figure sum, the retainer. And that for me meant I could move office, I could grow my team, I could get more staff. It was a really pivotal moment for me. And anyway, I stayed behind at the end. I was so excited. It was a really great opportunity. I was I was over the moon. I couldn't contain myself. And then Mr. Harley turned around and actually cut my fee. He reduced my fee on the spot. And I still said thank you. And I still walked out the room, and I got to the lift, and Mr. Juilliard walked up behind me and said, Bev, I'm really, really disappointed in you. And it's that word disappointed that whenever you hear that, you've done something really wrong. It's something that when your parents used to say it when you were young, and I was naughty once. So when the disappointed, I looked at him and he said, you have won that search on pure merit. You've won it on merit. You won it because you've delivered, and you've won it on merit. And I turned around and said, well, yeah, I have. He said, so why did you let Mr. Harley reduce your fee? And he literally took me by the shoulders very gently. He turned me round. He said, and I was wearing pink, my usual pink. He turned me round, and I had my feet were killing me. I was in high heels. Turned me around. He went, back in there, fight your corner. And I did. So it's sort of a slightly different question that you asked, but it's one of those things where I went back in, and I literally, why reduce my fee? And actually, in the end, he gave me back the full fee. I delivered what I was supposed to deliver on. And Mr. Juilliard said to me after that, he said, well, one thing I have taught you is put that armadillo suit on every morning. You need to have it, Bev, because me and money, I'm not always the best at negotiating. So I think for me, that was a really pivotal moment in my career. But it also goes then on to something else, which was what became my armadillo suit. And actually, it's my underwear. So for me, whatever I put on in the morning reflects how I'm going to go for my day. So, and you know me, Sam, I'm colour, right? So all of my underwear is in pochettes, in drawers, and I will take out my colour of how I'm feeling in that morning, and that gets me ready for my day. That is my armour. That's how I dress, and that is how I go to work. So convoluted.
I love that. I love that. That was not where I was expecting that story to go, but I absolutely love it. So the other thing we like to ask on the podcast is we like to set a personal challenge for our listeners. So if you were going to set a personal challenge to the listeners, something they could do for themselves or for someone else, what would that challenge be?
So again, I was reflecting on this, and with some work I've been doing recently, it's about being aware of your brand, because your brand is you, right? You are your own brand. It doesn't matter a company or organization you work at, people come to you for you. So again, I put a couple of words here, and I said, have courage and be kind. for where there is kindness, there is goodness. And where there is goodness, there is magic. So for me, it is all about your brand. It's always about being kind. It's always about checking in with friends and family. It's about making sure that you give the best that you can give, not only in your work, but your personal life. And that is checking in. People don't check in enough. You know, as you know, I'm a handwriter, right? So I am notes, cards, everything about me is that connectivity. So for me, it would be about kindness, and it would be about setting a challenge that every day that you live, do something kind.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I don't know how we've managed to get here, but we're at the last question. It's been so much fun listening to your story and learning more things about you.
Thank you.
As you said, we know each other quite well, but I've definitely learned some new things about you. It's called The Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. If you were going to put one thing into the guide, what would it be?
So again, I did mention it earlier. I would say make mistakes, do not regret them, but learn from them. So that would be that. But then I would say, for me, it's always remembering, and this is a quote by Edith Heard that I absolutely love, and it's, you can have anything you want in life if you dress for it. And for me, as a woman entering the world of investment banking back in my early 20s and in the late 80s, early 90s, I truly felt empowered by what I wore, and I still do. So those would probably be my
And not
my
just
answers.
on the outside, underwear as well.
Absolutely, and always matching.
Bev, thank you for sharing your journey and your story with us, and the highs and lows and the decisions you've made. I loved your personal challenge around courage and being kind to yourself and others, and that piece of advice. And that brilliant quote. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. I know the listeners will have really enjoyed learning more about your journey.
And thank you so much, Sam, for having me. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. Please do like, follow and subscribe wherever you listen or watch. It really does make a difference. So next week's episode is Sarah Pittendry. She is a serial entrepreneur, and she talks to us about the highs and lows of being in business, from hitting bankruptcy after the financial crisis in 2000 to the small business idea that saved her home from repossession. So join us next week to listen to her story. And in the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.